Matthew, turning to you first. Look, it's a tragic story because you're dealing with somebody who, on one hand, the public face, very well respected, very well trusted, 40 years at the corporation, an incredible broadcaster.
Absolutely.
Clearly troubled in his private life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the interesting things about Huw is I was at the BBC for 14 years. Huw was very well liked. He was seen as sort of one of the team. There were divas whose names I will not mention, but Huw wasn't one of them. And then clearly he's got himself in a very silly position where we don't know exactly what he did and he didn't do, but whatever it was daft at the very least and inappropriate, it seems, as well. I mean, I think it's now, I'm very glad that he's resigned because it was awful for the BBC to have to keep paying him, because one of the reasons is legally, if he was off sick, you can't sack somebody when they're off sick, otherwise they can bring a tribunal against him. So I'm glad that he's now done the decent thing. He's left. He hasn't been paid off. Obviously, he's been paid up till now, and hopefully he can get his life sorted out. His wife is also an ex-BBC person who's very, very much liked in the industry as well, so I hope they can sort themselves out.
And I'm assuming, James, that with something like this, because if you are involved in news and presentation, there are certain things where perhaps in your private life you can have misdemeanours if you're an actor or if you're not in public life, or there's certain things where you can go and get the help, you can go and get sorted out, and then you can come back to it. I think if you are in this particular role, he's going to have to find something else to do, is he not?
Absolutely. He was only the highest paid newsreader, I think only about 435,000 a year, but also the public process of all of this. I mean, of course, when the Queen died, the late Queen died in September 2022, it was Huw Edwards who broke the news, wearing the black, etc. He was very likely to be the front runner of this year's election night coverage. And I think that's the more interesting story in some ways, is we're partly a story about a man, and hopefully he'll get the treatment he needs and all the help he needs and deserves, but also about the corporation right now. We've had a real exodus of BBC talent in recent years, and I think the corporation ought to learn the lessons from this. I think actually the best bit of this whole sorry and edifying tale has been the final act, and the way in which this is handled clearly very gracefully by both of them today. And I think they hope they learned the lessons from last year when they had to apologise to the family of the boy that was alleged to be involved. So yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for someone in the public eye, and I just hope that, I think people of a different generation sure get the support they need and deserve.
Also, I suppose what it does also highlight, as you say, a lot of talent has left the BBC that they're going to have to consider very carefully as to who they have. And also, I think it does open up the whole debate about impartiality and the fact that lots of people have been in other roles and can't necessarily go back to that particular broadcaster, which means they have to focus on homegrown talent.
Absolutely, and Huw Edwards was a BBC lifer, 40 years being produced to the system. And I think the BBC right now, in terms of who it's putting forward, etc., it's going to be really difficult to find someone like that.
But I think you have to move away from this whole life.
Well, there were huge negotiations, of which I was kind of not quite the decision-making, but privy to when the transfer from Dimbleby to Huw. I mean, Huw said today, it's been an interview that he was originally offered it in 1992, that you could get it when David Dimbleby was kind of moved out. There were huge discussions about, is this David's last one? Then we had the extra 2017 election, so David clung on for that.
It sounds like Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
It's very much like that, in that kind of, as you say, in that kind of
cheeky lunch around the corner.
That generational thing in the BBC. So the big battle now is, do they put one of the general newsreaders in who probably get the 10 o'clock news, Reece Chakrabarti and Clive Meyer, who've basically been sharing it, are likely to carry on?
But nobody watches the 10 o'clock news anymore.
But do they put a political heavyweight in, like Laura Kuenssberg or Nick Robinson, in for the election programme, which is the single most expensive programme on British TV?
There you go.